Have you ever imagined dying, meeting God himself face to face and then coming back with an urgent message about the end of times? What if heaven was already closing and almost no one noticed? In today's video, you will learn the impressive story of Emily Grace Carter, a woman who had a near-death experience, was brought before the throne of God and witnessed shocking revelations about the last days of humanity. What she saw and heard will shake your soul. Prepare yourself to understand the true meaning of the sign of the end. Leave the like. Subscribe to the channel for more real and impactful stories like this, and comment below which city are you watching so we can know how far this message is reaching. My name is Emily Grace Carter. I'm 38 years old and I live in a small town called El Reno, Oklahoma. I am a mother of 2 and a high school teacher. Nothing in my life prepared me for what I experienced that day. And since then, nothing about me is the same anymore. On the night of April 13th, 2023, a fierce electrical storm formed over the city. Lightning lit up the sky as if God were writing something in the firmament. I was alone in the house when I felt a searing pain in my chest. Within seconds, everything went black. My heart had stopped. The last thing I remember on earth was the sound of thunder. After that, I left my body. I floated above the house, then over the entire city. There was absolute silence, as if time had been turned off. Then I was pulled upward with an irresistible force through layers of darkness and light until I've reached a place that no human words can describe. It was like being inside a living symphony. The colors had not only hues, but also sounds and feelings. In the center of it all was a throne of pure light pulsing like a heart. Around it, a multitude of indescribable beings. They seemed made of wind and fire, bowed in reverence. And it was then that he spoke, not with words, but with a voice that passed through every cell of my being. He called me by name. And without me saying a single word, he showed me the end. The ground beneath the throne began to open up. It was as if the sky was releasing something, souls, messages, justice. I didn't know. But then I heard what will echo within me forever. The sky is closing, the signs have been given, the protection is being withdrawn. I felt a burning heat, not physical, but spiritual. It was as if the pain of the entire earth was screaming at once. I saw cities sinking, I saw empty churches, I saw children crying out in the dark. And alongside all this, I saw lights. Little lights, growing, coming together. They were prayers. Some went out before they reached the throne. Others came like arrows of fire. Time is no longer a cycle. It is a line, and it is nearing its end. It was then that I understood. The tribulation is not a punishment. It is the moment when God stopped protecting what decided to walk away. He does not destroy, he withdraws. And this, my God, this is worse than any movie apocalypse. I tried to speak, tried to beg for more time, and then I heard another voice. It wasn't his. It was dark, dry, mocking. They don't believe it, they're too busy. And in that instant, I was thrown back to earth with the force of a lightning bolt. My body was shaking and paramedics were all around me. I had been revived after almost 9 minutes of clinical death, but I didn't come back the same. Since I got back, everything seems fragile. People go about their daily lives, driving, talking, checking their phones, without realizing what's about to happen. I walk among them with the feeling that I'm living in a movie about to explode into a climax. Because what I saw up there, it was not symbolic. It was literal. During the days following my NDE, the images came back in flashes. But in the early morning of the 3rd day, I had what I can only describe as a reconnection. I woke to the sound of trumpets that only I could hear, not metallic, but as if blown by living fire. My window shook, and then, as if a part of me was pulled back there, I saw the doors. They were immense, 2 luminous structures floating above something that looked like earth, but covered in darkness. There were millions of souls rushing toward the doors. But here is the most disturbing detail. The doors were closing. Slowly, yes, but closing. I saw angelic beings pushing light into the earth. It was as if each drop of light was a chance, an answer to a prayer, a last appeal. But on the other side, dark forces were rushing to block this light. Some won. Others were torn apart by the divine presence. It was a war, literally, and it had already begun. The sky is silent because it has already spoken. Now is the time for decision. This sentence echoed in my mind with terrifying clarity. Then I saw something even more serious. America was being watched. It was as if a scale hung over the United States. On one side, intercessors, men, women, even children, praying with tears. On the other side, shadows, sarcasm, indifference. The scales swayed, and then started to fall the wrong way. It was then that the throne appeared before me again. But this time, he was standing. Not sitting. Standing. That, to me, was the clearest sign of all, because heaven was about to act. And when the king arises, it is because something final is about to happen. Tell them, the rapture will be sudden. But the signs are not. They are already among you. At that moment, I was overcome with a deep pain, not physical. It was as if I felt the weight of all the souls who still did not understand. God's despair was not one of anger. It was one of regret. Like a father watching his children run into a fire without hearing his cries of warning. I came back to myself in tears. I knelt on the floor of my room and could only say, "Is there still time?" The answer came not with words, but with a shudder in my spirit, as if to say, little. In the days that followed, my life became a spiritual battlefield. It was as if my return had activated a sensitivity I never knew I possessed. I saw things. I felt presences. I heard voices without sound, and strangest of all, I recognized people from somewhere that wasn't of this world. One afternoon, as I was people watching in the supermarket, a woman passed me. She didn't look at me, but as we passed, I saw something on your forehead. It wasn't visible to the naked eye, but I noticed it, a dark mark like spiritual soot. And then I looked at a man across the line and I saw something different, a faint light around him like an ember about to go out. At that moment, I understood the division has already begun. It is not a literal mark. It is a vibrational spiritual separation, a seal that is already being defined by the choices and attitudes that each person is taking at this very moment. I returned home in shock. I opened the Bible as if it were a living device, not a book. My eyes fell straight to Revelation 7:3. Do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. It was like a rumble inside me. The seals are being placed. Now, before the visible chaos, before the world realizes. And then, that same night, I was taken again. But this time, it wasn't a place, it was an instant frozen in time. As if the world had stopped for a second and I was inside eternity, peering through a divine crack. I saw millions of people, all with cell phones in their hands, endlessly scrolling, distracted, oblivious. Some were laughing, others were crying, but they all had something in common. They didn't realize they were being watched from above. Above them hovered eyes made of fire, like heavenly sentinels. It was not judgment yet. It was analysis, assessment, a type of spiritual screening. And then I heard the voice again. They marked themselves. The choice is already being made. Whoever loves the truth will hear it. Whoever loves lies has already chosen them. It was terrifying. There was no neutrality, no gray zone. Everything is already aligning. Every soul, every heart, every decision like pieces on an eternal chessboard. And one more thing was shown to me. Time, as we know it, is no longer reliable. The spiritual clock, it is not counting 12 hours, but beats. Every beat, every decision, every silence or prayer, everything is speeding up or slowing down the unfolding of judgment. I woke up on the living room floor, my face wet with tears. I don't know how I got there, but I remember what I whispered before getting up. Seal us, Lord, before the last door closes. After that night, I started hearing things that no one else seemed to hear. Not voices exactly, but sounds of heaven. You know when you hear distant music, but you can't tell where it's coming from. It was like that. A low hum, like muffled trumpets behind a spiritual wall. Sometimes it was a sound like chains dragging, others like a choir crying. One afternoon, as I was driving down I-40 toward Oklahoma City, the noise became unbearable. I had to pull over to the side of the road. It was there, with the engine off and the sky beginning to cloud over, that the sky opened up. Not physically, but spiritually. My eyes were open, but what I saw was not this world. It was a turbulent sea of glass, as mentioned in Revelation. And above him, gigantic forms, thrones of judgment being positioned. They were going down, as if the sky were bringing the structure of judgment closer. Everything is already prepared. Time no longer waits for the repentance of those who mock the warning. These words did not come as a quiet revelation. They exploded inside me. At that very moment, I saw what they looked like: prayer towers scattered over several U.S. cities, like columns of fire rising into the sky. But many of them were cracked, nearly extinguished. And one in particular, over Los Angeles, fell silent at that instant. It was like seeing a celestial lamp going out. I cried with a despair that I can't explain. The feeling was of mourning for something that has not yet happened, but has already been decreed. What God showed me at that moment was terrifying. The screams will not come before the yow. Ruins they will come after, when many realize that the time for decision has passed. And then I heard the sound, a sound that made me shiver to the bone. It was as if the earth had begun to groan. A deep, primal vibration rippled through the planet as if it were the last sign before the rupture. In my mind, I saw the map of the United States cracking in half. I don't know if it was literal or symbolic, but the crack it went from north to south, passing exactly through the heart of the nation. The rift is not geographical. It is spiritual. The division is already established. At that moment I understood. Judgment will not come as a single event. It has already begun, but silently, disguised as normality. It infiltrates choices, approved laws, complicit silences, jokes made against the sacred. I returned home silent, without the strength to talk to anyone. I spent the whole night praying, but not for myself, for all those who still sleep with their eyes open. In the middle of the prayer, a tear fell on my pillow, and I heard one last phrase echoing inside me. The sky is playing the last note. Whoever hears it, let him stand up. The next morning, I woke up with a weight on my chest. Not physical. It was as if my spirit had been carrying something all night. I went out into the backyard, sat on the dew-soaked ground, and closed my eyes. That's when started again. Without warning, I was taken to a place that seemed between heaven and earth, a dark valley, but not completely without light. It was as if something secret was happening there. A war, but not of weapons. It was a war of words, of names. In front of me I saw thousands of beings. They looked like men, but they had empty eyes and mouths that never stopped talking. Every word they uttered had form. I saw lies turn into serpents, sarcasms turn into blades. They pronounced names, names of living people. And on the other side, I saw Wangles writing names in books with feathers made of liquid light. But the detail that chilled my soul was, many names were being erased. They are exchanging the name of saved for their own will, said a voice. It was the Lord. But this time, his voice was different. There was no sadness. There was decision. Justice. He showed me how people, by denying the truth and mocking the glory, renounce the right to be remembered in heaven. It tore me apart. I saw names flashing, slowly fading away, like emergency lights on a sinking ship. I saw pastors. I saw young people. I saw celebrities. I even saw people who called themselves spiritual. And I understood. Religion without surrender is just performance. And performance does not sustain anyone before the throne. I also saw children whose names glowed like liquid fire, and the Lord said, "These are the ones who pray without knowing they are praying. They are the last line of resistance." And then he showed me the room of decrees. It was like a cosmic courtroom. In the center, a gigantic book, the Book of Life. And the phrase that was given to me at that moment was, "Soon the last leaf will be turned." I trembled. I tried to speak. I tried to beg for more time. But the sky was silent. Not because I had given up, but because I had already decided. I was overcome by unbearable pain, as if the weight of millions of bad decisions was weighing me down. I saw one last image before I was returned to my body, a giant hand extending a flaming pen to someone on earth. "Write your name in eternity, but do it now, because later only silence will answer." I came back screaming, literally. My children ran to me. I said just one sentence. "Your name is still there, but for how long?" From that day on, I understood that the end times is not just an event, it is a process, and it has already begun. After that vision of the decree hall, something changed in the heavens. It wasn't just the sounds I heard or the names I saw being crossed out. It was the very thing that changed. Physical sky that seemed to want to shout a truth that few were willing to see. That night, while the world slept, I was awakened by a bright light coming through my bedroom window. But it was no ordinary light. It blinked in patterns like a code. Something told me to leave the house. I walked to the field behind the neighborhood. The sky was clear, starry, but different. The constellations seemed out of place, as if they had moved imperceptibly. And then, on the horizon, I saw something that shouldn't be there. An inverted column of fire, as if the heavens were being sucked into an invisible vortex. I knelt down, and when I placed my hands on the ground, I was sucked back into that reality, between worlds. This time what I saw was a map of the earth covered by a kind of golden net, interconnected by points of light. But little by little, some of these points began to blink red. Each red dot represented a place where the signal was being ignored. The sign. That was the name that came to me with force. It wasn't a comet. It wasn't an eclipse. It wasn't something NASA would announce. It was a spiritual moment that would materialize into a physical event. The sign was coming, and it wouldn't be pretty. I saw three things clearly. An American coastal town splitting in half as if the earth were opening its mouth. A flash in the sky over Europe, so intense that it would make it seem like the sun rose at midnight. And the most painful, children being separated from their parents by unseen forces. Not death, but spiritual separation. It was then that I heard a soft but firm voice. "When the sign comes, there will be no more time for questions, there will only be harvest." I was overcome by a feeling of a mixture of awe and terror. It was as if the universe itself were holding its breath. Time was compressing, and the sign was already on the way. Before I turned back, I saw an image that took my breath away. Angels in marching position, all with their eyes closed, waiting for an order. And behind them, a growing light, like a portal being activated. When I woke up, the physical sky was still full of stars, but the sense of spiritual urgency was undeniable. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "They won't understand, will they?" And the answer, without sound, came like a punch in the stomach. "Some do, but only after the sign has passed." Not long after I saw the sign, something very strange happened. Something physical. I was in a coffee shop in Yukon, Oklahoma, when I noticed that the clock on the wall had stopped. I looked at my phone. 11. I looked at the attendant's watch. Also, Thirst 11, I looked around and the world seemed to be moving. But time, no. For an instant that I cannot measure, time froze. But not chronological time, the time of the soul. It was as if all the hearts around me were beating in sync with something invisible and terrible approaching. At this moment, my eyes opened to a dimension that was superimposed on physical reality. The walls of the coffee shop disappeared. The customers were gone. I was sitting in the same chair, but in a different place, a place where the clocks were broken. I saw dozens of them of all types, digital, old, tower, pocket, all with the hands stopped, all marking 11:59. That's when the sky manifested itself again, but now like a living screen, showing scenes that seemed at once from the future and the present. I saw cities empty inside, people walking around with dull eyes as if they were living but already disconnected. And then I heard, "The time for warnings is ending. The time for decisions is almost over." I was taken to a sort of heavenly library, but instead of books there were floating hourglasses, thousands. And one by one the last particles of sand descended, slowly, until one of them was zero. At the same instant, a thunder tore through the skies and I heard the cry of an angel. "The city that does not listen will be silenced," said the voice. I clearly saw the names of 3 American cities flashing in the sky, like warnings. Los Angeles, Chicago Air. New York. I didn't see destruction. I saw silence, a kind of silence that carries weight, like the sound of a sentence being carried out. The voice continued. "The hand is suspended. The seal is being closed. When it falls, it will fall all at once." I began to cry desperately. I wanted to go back. I wanted to warn, but I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight. And then, in front of me, one last hourglass appeared. It was transparent, empty, but with cracks in its structure. "This is the last one, and it has no more sand." I returned to the cafeteria, panting in a cold sweat, while the clock on the wall started walking again, marking 11:12. But inside me, I knew. The clock in heaven did not go back. It stopped at the last minute. After the episode with the clocks, I couldn't sleep for 3 nights in a row. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw mobile angels, paralyzed like statues, waiting for something. It was as if the entire sky was suspended, in anticipation, as if the universe was breathing before a final act. In the early hours of the 4th night, I was awakened by an invisible force pulling me. My body remained in bed, but my soul was lifted with absurd speed, cutting through layers of the invisible until it stopped before a kind of celestial command room. Imagine an amphitheater made of living glass, pulsing with light. In the center, an oval table, but not made of wood or stone. It was made of condensed time. Over her they hovered 7 sealed scrolls. Each one glowed with a distinct color, as if they carried different destinies. Around the table were beings that I cannot fully describe. They seemed to have form, but they also were made of voice and presence. Their robes were like veils of pure energy, and behind them hovered the presence, God Himself. When He spoke, the space shook, but not like an earthquake. It shook inside me. Time no longer responds to humanity. Now it responds to my decree. And then He touched one of the scrolls. Immediately, one of the angels moved for the first time. It was as if that command had unlocked a cosmic gear, and it was at that moment that I saw the order to be released. Release the signal. The word was spoken only once, but its reverberation seemed infinite. Immediately, light streaked across the sky like arrows heading toward Earth. Each light landed on a specific location as spiritual markers. I didn't see them all, but I recognized some. A beach in California, a shopping mall in Dallas, a school in Atlanta, and surprisingly, an empty church in New York. These places weren't being condemned, they were being last warned. The last order is not one of destruction, it is one of separation. What is light will be light, What is darkness will no longer hide its nature. I saw crowds walking like zombies under a red sky. Some stopped, looked up as if something was calling them. These were the ones who still had living flame and spirit. But most just moved on, indifferent to what was about to happen. And then God looked at me, not with anger, but with something worse, eternal sadness. They have already chosen. Now I will just answer. After the release of the signal, I was taken again, but this time there was no smooth transition, no floating between worlds. It was like a sharp, direct pull, as if I had been ripped from the physical universe and thrown into the center of the spiritual plane. The landscape was of a cracked sky, divided between darkness and fire. On the horizon, two forces were positioned. On one side, a row of luminous beings like conscious flames carrying weapons that seemed to be made of sound and light. Each of them shone with what I can only call eternal authority. There was no anger on their faces, just a conviction so solid it made the ground vibrate. On the other side, a shapeless mass of pulsating darkness, as if hatred itself had taken shape. They writhed, they roared, but not like animals. Like twisted ideas, like living lies. Their mouths uttered words that materialized in the air, shadow serpents that attacked the heavens. And I was in the middle, not as a fighter, but as witness at the trial. Then I heard the voice, not coming from outside, but from within heaven itself. Time will no longer be counted by days. It will be counted by decisions. At that moment the clouds parted, and I saw the throne, raised above the war, supported by pillars made of prayers, some whole, some broken, and before the throne, a book was opened. It wasn't just any book. It was the book of separation. In it, the names were not organized by religion, country, or status. They were organized by spiritual recognition, those who knew him and those who never knew him despite saying his name. The angels began to move, but not to attack. They carried stamps. One by one they descended like living meteors and marked those who belonged to the light. I saw the seals shine on the foreheads of the righteous, a white fire without pain but with weight, as if eternity had finally found them. But there were many, many who simply were not touched. And what I saw in his eyes tore me apart. They didn't realize. They were in a kind of irreversible spiritual sleep. They didn't run. They didn't cry. They didn't know they were losing eternity. It was then that the battle began. Not with shouting, but with decrees. Every word spoken from the sky had the impact of a lightning bolt, and every lie told by the beings of darkness exploded in attempts at domination, but were rejected by the weight of the truth. Separation is not punishment, the voice said. It is revelation. And I understood. Judgment is not the destruction of the wicked, but the exposure of those who chose not to be in the light. The war was not about territories. It was about natures. The essence of each being was being revealed. There was nowhere to hide. The last image I saw was of a flaming sword hovering over the earth. It did not touch yet. It just spun silently, awaiting the final order. And beside it, angels waited, eyes closed, as if in prayer. Once the decree is sealed, nothing else can be changed. And then the sky fell silent. The moment the sky fell silent, something indescribable happened. It was not the absence of sound. It was the presence of a living, conscious silence. A silence that watched, weighed, judged. I wasn't just watching. I was within the divine decision itself. Before me, the throne became more immense, closer, more imposing. The light surrounding it did not burn. It revealed everything. Everything that was hidden in me. Everything that was hidden in humanity. It was as if there were no more veils between God and creation. In front of the throne, they appeared 7 figures, each holding a scroll. But these were not the scrolls of separation that I had seen before. They were different, heavier, more endings. The Ryu voice spoke again, and this time there was no room for doubt. These are the decrees. They will not be postponed any longer. One by one, the scrolls were opened, and as they unrolled, his words became realities. Not symbolic visions, but absolute orders, which began to manifest themselves in sequence, like stones thrown into cosmic waters. The first decree, he was the removal of protection. I saw a kind of translucent field, like a spiritual shield, being drawn back from the earth. Not immediately, but like a low tide, leaving everything exposed. The second, he was the elevation of the sealed. I saw those who had been marked before being taken into light. They did not scream. They knew, and they were ready. The third decree was the heaviest, the release of illusion. And I understood. Those who did not want the truth would now have lies as their constant companion. I saw multitudes being covered by mist, their consciences erased, living false realities as if they were absolute truth. The fourth decree, he was the activation of natural judgments. I saw earthquakes, receding seas, the sun losing strength in some regions and burning others, not as punishment, but as a consequence. The earth reacted to the absence of light. The fifth, the silence of mercy. She who for centuries interceded, begged, whispered to hearts, now she was silent. Not out of cruelty, but out of justice. The time for choosing was over. The sixth decree was the most moving, the summoning of the last. A small group spread throughout all nations who, even without having ever heard a sermon, still cried out in the spirit for the truth. I saw angels leaving at absurd speed to rescue these remnants. Heaven would not forget them. And finally, the seventh decree, the closing of the book. I saw the book of life sealed, a golden seal with blood and fire. And with that, the judgment was sealed. Nothing more would be added. Nothing more would be deleted. The last vision I had was of God himself turning his face away for a moment. And when that happened, the entire universe seemed to shake, not with anger, but with a lament so deep, so eternal, that it seemed to swallow everything around it. "It is done," said the voice. And then everything went out. There was no sound. There was no image, just a living, breathing presence of eternity. And it was at that exact second that I was returned. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.